What's up, guys? Been a little while, as you can tell by the attire. It's been cold. Back at work this last week, so we're just kind of getting back in the swing of that. But headed to the shop. Let's see what we get done today. Might change gears for a little bit. Start messing with that motor. Here we go. All right, so we're all changed out. It's cold. It's windy. You're gonna hear that door rattling in the video every now and then. Sorry, I can't control it. The wind is howling. Well, let's go ahead and get into what we're gonna get into today. But first, let me show you a couple goodies that my buddy Nick helped us obtain. He's a garage sale nut, and I appreciate you for being that way. And he's always thinking of other people, which is also awesome. And he scored me some pretty cool stuff. First, he got these cool as hell, old school style Moroso tall Chevy valve covers. Right on. I want those because I'm going to get rid of those B&M units, and they're going to actually save us a little space for the linkage we have to make, and just look more proper on that blower motor when we go through that. Looks more race car. Then he's got this set of Vortec finned chromies, low-rise guys, which is cool. Those might find their way on my old Chevy pickup just to spruce it up. It came with a sweet matching finned oil pan, which is, good God, about as heavy as the rest of the truck, and that tall air cleaner. Cool as hell. I appreciate you, Nick. He picked them up, asked if anybody wanted them. I said, yeah. And when we went down to pick up the Pathfinder, Torino, and the 500, he threw them in the back of the Pathfinder for me. So other things I picked up was I got some Holly goodies, some pump cams for the carburetors, so that I can get tuning on that bad boy when it's time to go back in the truck. And also I've got about 1,000 carburetors I need to rebuild around here. So I just picked up a couple sets of those. Those carburetors also need rebuilt on that blower motor, but I digress. Today, I'm probably going to take a break from the metalwork. One, because it's freezing cold. And when you're working with sheet metal and you've got a welder like this that can run on 110, the hardest thing to do is to keep the heat in the metal when it's really cold. And today I'm going to use that as an excuse not to mess with it. I don't want to get burnt out on the metalwork. I've got tons to do. I also need to get some degreaser and clean the chassis up, because what I'm probably going to do is when I cut those mounts off and the truck's kind of hanging off the frame, I'm going to go ahead and paint the chassis anywhere I can on the top that's not accessible when the truck's put together. So going to take a break from the fab, at least for this video. And we're probably going to work on the small block today, which goes into the truck. So let me do some cleaning. I got to move the welder, set up the press in a better spot, do a little bit of floor cleaning and a little bit of organizing, and we'll jump right into it and get going. Side note, accepting volunteers if anyone wants to help me clean this nightmare up and make it less like this. Be great. Thanks. All right, today we're going to get these old pistons off the rods that we're going to reuse in the 302 that's going to power Lola. Now, we aren't going back the way it was. That wind is howling. We have done things to improve the motor. Not necessarily reliability, because the motor was super reliable. The failure was a freak incident. We've taken steps to make sure that doesn't happen either. But we've upgraded things like got us a new big boy camshaft. We've upgraded to better designed roller lifters. Because they didn't fail, but had one ticking But man, the motor was, at that point, looking at the motor after tearing it down, someone put like an E303 cam in it, which, despite popular belief, if you spec that cam out and you compare an E303 to a stock 1991 Mustang GT cam, same thing. So they put a Mustang camshaft in it, put some adjustable valve train in it, and it probably made a little more than normal. But the heads were too big for the camshaft to use all of it. It just wasn't a good match set. So we are going to reuse the cylinder head. Have gone through them, have resurfaced them, fixed the valve that bent. But these are not just iron heads off of an old Mustang or pickup truck. These are actually Roush 200cc iron heads for circle track cars, for class racing. We're keeping them because I like people to look under the hood, see iron heads, and assume it's slow. Not a race car, but it should make some good power. We're changing to a different carburetor because the carburetor is what actually caused the failure in the other engine. There was an insert in the other carburetor right here that this was drilled larger, and someone had put an insert in there, glued it in or epoxied it in. And anyway, after a few thousand miles, that had broke free and allowed the air cleaner stud to unscrew itself by way of what it was screwed into was loose, and it popped out, fell down into the primaries, hung open the throttle. We were driving in a line of other cars because we were on power tour. Truck took off, probably at 3/4 throttle. Only thing I knew to do was pop it in neutral real quick and smack the key, shut it off, but the engine had free spun. When that rod came off, either the bottom of that bushing fell off, unscrewed, or broke off, and it went down in the engine. And this is what it did to number 7. Luckily the block survived, but it cracked this piston, bent the intake valve pretty good, and tore some stuff up. So that is going on the wall of shame. It is cracked all the way through. Let me see if I can get a picture of it for you guys. So there, man, it's not cooperating at all, is it? There's the crack right there, all the way through. So this cylinder lost compression initially on the side of the road because I didn't know what happened. When I pulled the air cleaner stud up, to all of us there, looked like, you know, an oopsie where an air cleaner stud backed off, fell in the carburetor, no big deal. Pull the carb off, get the stud out, put the carb back on, start the motor. All we hear is what sounds like rod knock. Ooh. So this is power tour, man. There's people all over willing to help. So me and a buddy, Sam, who was with us on tour, pulled the truck over into this, a little further off the road, into this grassy little pull-off area that happened to be across the street from an elementary school. So I was worried we were going to be a little distracting, but we were able to, using scissor jacks and hope, get the truck up on a couple piles of 2x4s we were using as jack stands, lift the motor enough to drop the oil pan, oil pickup tube, and inspect all the bearings. All the bearings felt fine. No play excess in any direction. So we put it together, put the pickup tube back on, oil pump back on, oil pan back on. Just an obnoxious amount of glue to seal it up. Got it back closed up, put it back together, took the intake off, found what we thought was the piece that may have been causing the trouble, pulled it all apart, threw intake gaskets back on it, closed it up. This is all on the side of the road. Start it, still have that knocking noise and a misfire. I was convinced at this point it wasn't a rod knock, so I was willing to kill that cylinder, but we had ripped the oil pump gasket or something, because the oil pressure was it was fluctuating a little too much for my liking. So we called Power Tour. It is what it is. Things happen. Cars break. It sucks. Got home, pulled the motor, and started really looking at the truck, getting ready to do just floor pans, and it has snowballed into this. So she's getting fully restored now, but she's going to be one of my most trusted and best hot rods I have. So in the end, it's okay. Anyway, back to what we're doing today. All right, so when you're dealing with pistons, whether it's a V8, a 4-cylinder, a 6-cylinder, straight 6, V6, any of that stuff, there's things you need to look for. On camera, that mark right there that was just there looks really bad, but it's not. It's a goofy camera angle thing and weird light. That line right there is nothing. You can't feel it, and the cylinders look great. So number 2, you need to identify what type of pin you have. This is a press in the rod floating in the piston. How it's pressed into the rod and its location in the rod is actually how it's held in place. There are no locks on these pistons. Does that matter if we were going to reuse these pistons? Not necessarily, but I'm not. I bought a whole set of pistons, new set of rings. We got them over here. Got the crankshaft sitting here. And then I've got my hone to go through the motor, some honing oil. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf and do things by the book. I used to do it with diesel or transmission fluid. Any of that stuff actually does work pretty good. So I'm not going to tell you not to use it, but just know that technically it's not the same. So do with that what you will. I'm just moving these used pistons out of the way here so we can get to our new shiny ones. Ooh, look at how pretty. Okay, so get a new set of pistons. I got these from Summit. They came with locks. They are forged units, but you get this nice little guide about ring gap. You're going to need to know what you plan to do with your car and these pistons to set the proper ring gap. Ring gap is very, very important when it comes to the power you want to make. So pay attention to that, please. And your new pistons will come with new locks if they require them. So just because your old pistons didn't need locks does not mean your new ones won't. My new ones will require locks, but here they are in all their glory. You'll also notice little other things and other details about these. When you pull your old pistons out, Ford was really good about putting an arrow on their pistons, which it's right there on that relief next to the pin. And then they also put a corresponding dot on top of the casting. It's a big circle in the top of the casting. That needs to face the front of the engine. They're telling you which way to point the piston. So when you pull off your pistons, press on your new ones facing the same way. Now, there's a lot of different ways guys will do this. I use a paint pen, mark the cap, good to go. There's guys that'll mark dots in their pistons, dots in their rods, and I just think that's, honestly, that's a pain in the butt. And I also do one piston at a time. So that's why my way might work a little bit better than some other guys. Some dudes will press all 8 off and then go to press all 8 on. To me, that leaves a window open for mistakes. So what we're going to do is make some marks on this piston, and then we're going to get ready to press the old one off, press the new one on. All right, nice and easy. Got my arrow, and because I'm a dunce and I might grab that, I got my backup arrow. So the key to pressing these is, you see how that sticks out? You're going to basically press this pin from this side into something using this as your flat surface. So these blocks aren't always going to be what's right or what's going to work the best. I tend to use impact sockets. They can take pressure, and typically your whole wrist pin will fit inside there, so it's not a big deal. As you can see right here, this socket is every bit as big as that wrist pin is long, but all I'm really doing is pressing this side far enough out to get past the rod, and then it will actually just fall out. So you've got to get something to cover it, like yay, and then you can stand her up using your borrowed or purchased jack style press, get it pressed out, and get ready to put your new one on. Okay, I had to switch up the socket being used because none of my impact sockets will actually fit in there properly. You need to check to make sure this is going to clear the piston while also putting full force on the pin. So I've got it rigged up here. There's not a lot of pressure on it right now, just enough to hold it so you can see kind of the setup I'm using. This is very, very backyard and rudimentary, which means any of you should be able to mimic what I'm doing here. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. Granted, in this particular spot, you're not going to see a bunch of high-tech cool gadgets. I'm limited on space and power, so I'm using basic stuff to get the job done. So as you can see, it's already coming out, minimal pressure, and it's pushing that pin right out, which is exactly what you want to do. You're not binding, you're not gouging, you're not getting held up by anything. So I'm gonna stop a little short here and release the press. Let's see our progress so far. So socket out, and at this point the pin is clearly coming out the other side. We're almost flush with that connecting rod. So now we've got to definitely make sure our socket is good and centered. The factory wrist pins on this particular motor, they float on the piston, but they're pressed into the rod. So it's not a full floating pin. It only floats in the piston, which allows it to rotate in accordance with the rod's position on the crankshaft and the revolution, the point in the revolution that it's in. So there's a lot of moving parts. You've also got to note what your new ones are doing. So I bought new pistons, as you can see here, and the pins have these little grooves, or the pistons have these little grooves in there for locks. So this pin is going to float in this piston, but it has a locker to keep it from moving side to side. Or it has a lock, sorry. The old ones didn't. The old ones had a bunch of excess meat right here that basically rubbed the rod or were real close to the rod, so there was minimal deflection. As you can see right here, you see how nice and tight the rod is in there to that piston. The new pistons are forged, and so they take a bunch of that meat, that I call it, out to save weight, because of race car stuff. So you've got to get the rod centered on the pin, and then the keepers or locks will keep the pin from moving in the piston. So there's a lot of different components at play here. I'm going to get this the rest of the way out, and then we'll talk about the different styles of wrist pin locks and why I prefer the style that I got. Ta-da! That came out no problem. Means it's going to be a good day. All right, now let's talk about the three main components in each cylinder of whatever engine you have. 4, 6, 8, 2, 1, I don't care what you have. If it's a 4-stroke engine, here's the parts. You've got your connecting rod, your wrist pin, and your piston, and the jobs of each. The piston, as you can see, it takes a lot of abuse. The explosion happens here, pushes this down, that then has to push back up to release all the exhaust gases, and in turn pull back down to suck in the air fuel mixture, compress it, repeat. Okay? That can't happen without the other two components. You've got the connecting rod that does the pushing and the pulling via the crankshaft in the big journal. But in the small journal, you have your wrist pin. Now the wrist pin is the second most abused piece of equipment here. This bad boy takes the force of the piston on the outer edges. You know, when the piston sees the ignition cycle, it gets pushed down on the ignition cycle, all while being pushed against the crankshaft through the connecting rod in the center. So these are very strong, very important pieces of your engine. All three pieces have different versions of themselves. You have forged pistons, hypereutectic pistons. The pistons that are coming out of this motor are hypereutectic, which is a really fancy word for weak stock. They will do good in stock applications. Most cars going down the road have them. Late model stuff is starting to go forged because you're starting to get a bunch of the EcoBoosts and turbo applications that require forged internals for strength. But hypereutectics need a lot more meat for strength. They're thicker. They can be heavier, but weirdly they're weaker. So they crack easy, they break easy in boosted applications. When detonation occurs, they break, they rip ring lands off, which is this area right above that compression ring. And we'll get into it, but that's why your ring gap is so important also. And then you have your connecting rod. When you hear guys saying stuff like I threw a rod, or they're talking about this guy, they broke one of these. One of the most important components in an engine. We're staying naturally aspirated, not going very crazy or high horsepower. So these are going to work fine for us. These are the factory units that we're putting in this motor. We're going to just say 1991, but it's a late 80s, early 90s Ford roller block, and those connecting rods came in it. So they're old. But again, we're not, if we see 300 wheel horsepower out of this old pickup, we're doing something, especially with only 302 cubic inches. So we're not setting the world on fire with this thing, just looking to have some fun. With connecting rods, you have many different types and many different styles. You've got H-beam, I-beam, forged, heat treated, cold treated, it just shot peened. There's so many different things you can do to make those stronger and last longer, and we are doing exactly none of them. Like I said, we're here for a simple build on this one. We're going to go crazy on that one a little bit. And then, of course, the Camaro that's getting that heart transplant will be a never-ending project of making things stronger. So another thing we're going to discuss is this is the wrist pin that requires no locks, okay? It just floats in the piston. This is the wrist pin that requires locks. You're going to notice it's shorter. That's for the room for the locks. The other thing that you need to make sure of is that the diameter of this matches the diameter of that, especially when reusing connecting rods. If this is loose, you're going to have problems there that you don't want nothing to do with. So I'm going to grab a digital caliper. There's only two sizes of these wrist pins, and they're quite a bit different. And as you can see, these are the same. But to dot my I's and cross my T's off camera real quick, I'm going to make sure those are the same, and then we'll move forward with getting this bad boy pressed in place and good to go. Alrighty, using my handy dandy Fowler digital caliper, those are the same. So again, the length isn't the most important part here, because the length of your wrist pin has to match your piston's requirements. The diameter has to match both. Hopefully that makes sense. Since myself and the manufacturer agrees these are acceptable replacements for each other, this, I don't know, it's up for debate if it's going to be part of a statue or something. But for now, it's just going to hang out of the way. Now we can start prepping to put our piston onto our rod via our wrist pin. And to do that, step one is going to be making sure our arrow matches our arrow when we get it all set up. And then we do what we did to get it out in opposite. The key here is your alignment. This needs to be perpendicular to the wrist pin, and the wrist pin needs to be going straight through your rod and the piston, and it needs to be lined up with the hole on the other side. Okay? You'll know you're in the right spot when you get your locks to line up properly, and I'll show you what that looks like when I get this lined up. Because this part requires two hands and it's just me here, I do apologize. I'm not going to be able to film this very well, so I'm going to get this first one done and show you the end result. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you get there as long as your end result is the result. All right, piston pressed in. As you can see, when this one is right on the edge of that groove, this side also is on the edge of that groove. And we're centered. Now, don't overthink this part. Everyone does, including myself, the first time I did one. I've seen guys trying to mark center and make marks on wrist pins and do all this and do all that. There's no sense to it. If you press through from one side and keep going through with the rod set where it needs to go, you're going to go past the lock groove on the first side. If when you pick the piston up you slide back just by the act of pressing it, you slide it back and you're only pressing the one way, you slide it back till the groove touches the lock groove and the other side's lined up, you're centered. It's that easy. Don't overthink that part. You'll drive yourself nuts. All right, so that brings us, now that this guy's on, to locks. You've got two main types of locks, and both require a groove in the piston. Okay, see that little groove right there in the piston? Right where the ring of the piston pin is right now. Lift it up. It's that little groove. That's where your lock goes. Here's the locks I prefer. They're spring steel. They have to be compressed. They're a little bit more difficult to get into the groove of the piston, but once in, because they're so hard to get in, they are a nightmare to get out. They have a real low failure rate, but a lot of guys hate them, and understandably so, because these can get twisted up, these can get mangled, you can over compress them and make them weak. There is things you can do to mess these up. The other type is called a spiral lock, and I don't have any here because I have seen so many of those fail personally from other engine builders. Excuse me. I'm not going to mention names because it doesn't just happen to one engine builder. It happens to a lot of them. And it's basically a flat piece of steel that's wound, and it looks like if you pancaked every loop of a coil spring and flatten the whole thing down. They're called a spiral lock. And those work in the same way. You put the edge in and you just work it around until it all goes into that little groove in the piston, and then it's held in place by blind luck and a little bit of force applied by the wrist pin. What happens with those is because they're such thin steel, the leading theory is they'll get hot depending on application, and one end of that will work its way out. Once it gets out of this groove, it'll find its way between the piston and the cylinder wall, and it'll just start eating stuff up. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is it ends up between here and it goes down into the crankcase where you don't get any early warning signs, and then your wrist pin's just in there doing whatever it wants, and it takes out the block to the point where the block can't be saved. Obviously the piston's going to be dead. More than likely the rod's going to be dead. The wrist pin's junk because the locks are obviously no good. So they do a lot of damage. Obviously any wrist pin failure of any kind is going to do tons of damage. So take this part of the project very seriously. I'm going to get these locks in. Again, two-handed job. So I'm not going to be able to film much of it. Your pistons will have instructions. And then I'm going to repeat this process 7 more times. And once this is done, I'll have a full set of pistons ready to go in the motor. We'll see what we have for time today. We may or may not continue going. Again, that wind is getting nasty, and it is not getting any warmer in here. So we will play it by ear and go from there. One thing I may have forgot to mention, and I do apologize for that, so I'll bring it up now. When you're assembling these things, make sure you get some form of lubrication on that wrist pin where it contacts the piston. That helps prevent premature wear on that first startup when you don't have any oil pressure. I use this stuff on wrist pins and stuff like that, overhead cam engines. But I use this stuff on all my bearings for like rod bearings, main bearings, camshaft bearings. This is what I put on there. Their stuff's great. It's been around forever, super trusted. This stuff, however, you can get even on Amazon. It's a great product. It's really thick, and to your fingers it feels kind of sticky, but it's a great lubricant for like overhead cam engines, wrist pins, these tight tolerances that don't necessarily have a bearing material that may take a little while before they see oil. So make sure you get something in there to protect it on that first startup. You don't want your brand new engine to already have problems. So I'm gonna get back after it and knock out these last few pistons, and then we'll get back at it, see what kind of time we have in the day. The next thing we're going to do in the series on this engine is we're going to assemble the bottom end. So crankshaft in the block, after honing the block, and then rods to crankshaft, get all that torqued down, and then we'll go after cylinder heads, and then we'll be able to paint it. So I'm probably going to break this up into a couple series because I really want to show you guys how to get it done and how I do it. So each step is going to probably be its own video. So if there's something you want to see in this process in more detail, drop a comment, let me know, and I'll do my best to cover everything as best I can. But it's just me. I only got 2 hands. So some stuff I'm not filming today. Because I'm just trying to get it done. So if there's anything you want to see, holler at me and I'll try to cover it. Appreciate you all. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and show you how thick this stuff really is. So there it is in the lock, down inside there on the wrist pin. I went ahead and pulled this lock so you guys could see. I'll try to do it one-handed. This stuff really is nice and thick. And this is that red Permatex engine assembly lube. And it wipes up nice. So if it gets somewhere you don't want it, you can just wipe it right off. But you see how thick that stuff is sticking to the fingers. It's great stuff. So to recap, make sure you're getting lube in the right places. And with everything that I try to show you guys, just take your time. You're not in a rush here. I'm assuming you own the car. I own everything that you see me working on outright. The good thing about owning a vehicle, especially a project vehicle, is they are really good at just sitting right there and waiting on you. So don't rush it. That's when you get subpar product or subpar end result. You end up breaking things. You end up causing yourself to waste money, time, effort. And we all don't have an infinite amount of any of those. So take your time. Lube what needs lubed. If you don't have lube, wait. And you'll end up with something you can be proud of. You can pat yourself on the back. And when somebody says, who did that? You can look them dead in the eye and go, I did. So keep wrenching, keep grinding, Make sure you do one thing on your project every day and it'll never stall. And I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Drop a like, drop a comment again. Tell me what you want to see me cover in the future, and we'll do it. We'll probably be throwing sparks on this one again soon. Got plenty of motor to build. And then we've even got some transmission stuff we're going to do to this one. So I appreciate you. Thank you all. We'll see you on the next one.